Hello everyone, you're all very welcome to today's webinar, Future-Proof Your Business with Cloud Financial Management. Today's webinar will be hosted by myself, Robert Top. I'm the Client Director here at Storm Technology. I will be joined shortly by my colleague, Brendan Geraghty. Today, the support, technical upgrades and security patches to on-premise ERP are slowly grinding to a halt. Moreover, businesses are seeking ways to empower their employees to work better. One of the ways to ensure that your business is agile enough to meet the stringent demands placed on it is moving your on-premise ERP to the cloud. And with the entire world working remotely, on-time access to different applications, verified and updated data, access on the move, and ensuring security and compliance becomes critical. D365 offers a modern interface with inbuilt best practice processes, which makes migration to the cloud a smart move. However, to migrate from on-prem to cloud-based D365, you need an in-depth assessment, the right preparation, and the help of an experienced partner. To help tackle this challenge, today's webinar will explore how to harness our know-how to assess, upgrade, and customize your ERP cloud project seamlessly. The agenda for today's webinar is as follows. Firstly, I'll introduce you to our speaker. We will explore the benefits of moving to a cloud ERP system, outline why you should consider Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. We will introduce you to our Storm's project assessment, and we will explore important considerations before embarking on a cloud project. And finally, there will be some time allocated at the end for a Q&A, so we encourage you to submit your questions at any point during the session using the Q&A panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. Finally, this morning's session will be recorded with a copy of the recording shared with all attendees by email after the session. Our speaker today is Brendan Geraghty. Brendan is a chartered certified accountant with over 20 years financial experience across a range of industries and financial transformation projects with various platforms. Brendan leads the successful implementation and delivery of business technology solutions to Storm's client base. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Brendan to kick off the webinar.
Thanks, Robert. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for all taking the time today to attend this webinar. I'm glad you're using that old picture of me there, Rob, pre-COVID times. I think I've kind of rounded out a little bit since then. As Robert had just said in his introductions, I'd like to run through some areas for you to consider when looking at ERP in the cloud. So at the moment, you may be looking at moving your existing Business Central on-premise solution to the cloud, or if you don't have Business Central at the moment, you're investigating ERP cloud solutions. So hopefully from today's webinar, I'll answer some of the areas of your concern or address some areas of your concerns. My overall aim from today's webinar is to give you areas to consider and topics to spark conversation internally in your organization as you look at updating and modernizing your ERP. So starting off with looking at the benefits of moving to cloud, one of the things I'd like to begin with is what actually is the cloud? And I suppose from my point of view, that all depends on who you ask. I'm sure if you asked your IT manager or what they thought cloud was, they'd give you a very technical, detailed description. If you asked whereas if you ask the general manager of the company, they're going to give you a more strategic, high-level view. And I suppose I'm an accountant, so I'm going to come at this from an accountant CFO point of view. But if you're the IT person as well, you're going to have to address this as well. The accountant, in my view, is responsible for the data management of the company, interpreting that data, reporting on that data, and your concerns may well be technical and strategic. But you're also going to have operational concerns. What are the gains in time going to be, and what is the employee utilization going to be? But ultimately, what is the cost going to be? And finally, I've put this one in here. And look, this is probably 5 months of lockdown talking. But you could ask your teenage son or daughter. But if they're anything like mine, you're going to get an eye roll and a humph. So they're probably not the best one to ask. So firstly, what I'd like to do is I just want to define when I talk about what do I mean when I talk about premise or on cloud. So local or on-premise is where you load the software that you've purchased licenses for onto your own hardware, and by that I mean your servers. You're now responsible for the availability of that software and the maintenance of the system and the hardware. So that could be a comms room with a full air conditioning and fire suppression system, or in some places I've worked in the past, it could be a server rack under the stairs. It is your responsibility. And cloud in this instance, when I'm talking about it, and I'll show you the different versions in a second, this is where you acquire the software as a service. And this means that the responsibility for the availability and maintenance of that software rests with the vendor, not with you. You're effectively paying a fee to outsource that responsibility. So like I mentioned earlier, there are many different flavors to cloud, and I'd like to run through the options out there with you now, just so you have an idea of what potentially is available, but also to see how someone's idea of cloud might be different from your own. So like any major project you're undertaking, it's important to know where you want to end up. And also, when someone asks you to move your ERP to the cloud, you're better equipped to realize what they want and assess its suitability to your organization's needs and capabilities. So private on-premise is the first one, and this is more the traditional one. This is one that we've always had, the pre-cloud, where all your data, all your applications, security, the OS, servers, storage, networking, all are within your area of responsibility to manage. You might outsource it, but it's still your area of responsibility. The first cloud type I have is infrastructure as a service, IaaS. And here you outsource the servers, the storage, and the networking to a third party. You're still responsible for the provision of the application, which is the software, the operating system of the servers, or the data management and security and integration with other systems. And some of you might already have this and would consider this cloud already. And this option has been around for several years, and it's still available and it's still a viable option now. Effectively, you place an on-premise version of your ERP on a supported infrastructure. It's cloud, but the software itself is your responsibility, and that's the key difference that we have to get across. Next up is platform as a service, and this is a step up from infrastructure, and it's where it has all the same outsourced functions to your vendor as IaaS, but also the management of that OS, your databases, your system security integration is now managed by your third-party vendor. You're still responsible for the ERP and the application itself, and by that I mean you're responsible, or your partner that you've outsourced to is responsible for the updates and security patches. And so finally, what we get to, and what we would refer to, and what I would refer to in the rest of this webinar as cloud, is software as a service. And this is where everything is outsourced. You're not responsible for providing the servers. You're not providing network management, OS management, database management in the background, the security application stuff, or any upgrades. You're solely responsible for the data within that application. And by that data, I mean your master data and your financial data. So you can see you're effectively buying someone else's thing to manage it. So I've got a number of different ways of getting your cloud to ERP, and we know that each one is slightly different. So some involve an on-premise version in the cloud on a cloud-based server, and whereas others, which I just mentioned there, is the software as a service model, they're web-based versions of the ERP application in the cloud, and you subscribe to those. So next, I want to have a look at the benefits of this type of structure, the software as a service model, over the traditional, more upfront costs, licensing cost, and managing your own service method. So firstly, one of the key benefits to cloud ERP is its faster deployment time and the resulting cheaper setup costs. There's no upfront license costs or no upfront hardware purchase, no service to buy, and that reduces your initial capital expense. The software is readily available with limited installation fees. There's none of this, have to get my network set up, set up the servers, load everything onto it and configure it. Your initial costs are purely customization of the ERP to your processes where you need them. So the ERP comes as standard and you can change that if you need to. Also, what I find, the licensing model is defined at the start, and that spreads your cost out over time. And for the accountants among you, that makes liquidity management and budgeting much easier. You've got a fixed amount depending on number of users, etc., and you can just roll that out year on year. Secondly, Business Central ERP is a software as a service product. It's running on the world's largest hyperscale infrastructure. That's Microsoft Azure, and Microsoft have data centers all over the world. So you can have them in Europe, England, Ireland, if you want them in the States and so on, with guaranteed uptimes and availability exceeding 99%. So you really don't have to worry about the system being down when you need it. It's an enterprise level platform, Business Central, which you can provide your organization for a monthly fee without the large setup cost that I mentioned earlier. It's also supported by knowledgeable experts here at Storm, obviously, maybe with your own provider at the moment, but also at Microsoft as well. Thirdly, one of the great advantages to software as a service is its scalability. And by scalability, I mean the speed at which you can get new users or extra storage space should you need it. But not only that, you can remove users and remove the extra storage space once you don't require it anymore. So again, I'm going to come back to this from an accounting point of view. So you can conceivably say, well, I need more users at year end. Therefore, I'm going to get extra subscriptions. But I don't need them in February, so I'm going to cancel them from February onwards. I'm really only going to pay them for 3 months, January, February, or December, January, February. SaaS can respond quickly to that. It's an email to us. We'll purchase the license and allocate them for you. So any changes in your business circumstances can be actioned quickly. It's not a perpetual license like in the past that you still hold and can't get rid of. And this also applies to storage space. Do you need more storage space? Do you need less storage space? It can be increased and decreased as much as you want. Fourthly, the next point is that you have the ability to be able to access and update your information and your data instantly from anywhere. And that kind of brings in my next point, which is remote working. You don't have to be in the office. You don't have to have a VPN. You don't have to use a remote network connection to your servers to access your ERP. All you need is a broadband connection and a Business Central license that's allocated to your Microsoft user account to access the system. So you can work from anywhere. I can access it here from home. I can access it from the coffee shop. I'd like to be able to access it from the pub, but that's unfortunately not possible. And lastly, for this slide, it's a simplified solution. That doesn't mean it has and by that I mean it doesn't have it has the same functionality as the on-premise solution, but it's a standard solution for customers. That makes it easier to support. It's not a version of it saved on someone's servers that could be slightly different everywhere else. It's a standard solution that all customers have, and this makes it, from a customer key user point of view and also from Storm's point of view, easier to support. So if I move on to the next slide, and I've entitled it "Wait There's More," and again at this point I feel like one of those guys on the shopping channel. Storm are now going to offer a free Storm branded paring knife today rather than the normal golf clubs and tees, or golf t-shirts and tees. As I've already mentioned, the initial capital investment is low. It makes financial sense. The lower licensing costs, the hardware costs, they all lead to a quicker return on investment. As well, and by that you see the benefits sooner. Reduced deployment times mean you can be up and rolling much quicker. The lower upfront costs also initially reduce your lower cost of ownership over time in the long term. Your data is always backed up, and this is a good point. As standard with Business Central Online, your database is going to be continuously and automatically backed up and held for 30 days, and these backups can be accessed by the administrator and restored whenever you need them. So you don't have the older one where model where you have to work with your IT department, or if you're the IT department, to come up with a backup routine and storage of it. And then kind of how do we load that back up and get the business working again? The next point is disaster recovery. It's a good point, and I suppose some people may think that disaster recovery in terms of a tsunami, an earthquake, or a meteor about to strike Dublin or whatever, but when actual fact mostly disaster recovery in this case means something happens to the buildings in which your server is located. That could be a fire, it could be a pipe leak, and with the multiple sites with Azure, Microsoft Azure server sites that comes in, that's not a problem anymore. You're not tied to your office building. This kind of ties back into the remote networking. Your employees can work remotely. So if a builder is doing roadworks outside, and I've seen this happen, they accidentally cut the broadband cable outside of the road as they're laying down the tar, cutting it open. Your staff can still work remotely and access the ERP. So from a disaster recovery and operations point of view, that's a great feature to have. And again, I suppose the next point is business continuity planning. It demonstrates the ability for your operations to continue to event of a disaster. There's not a case of, well, we've backed it up to the global head office servers somewhere else, or we have to get new office space elsewhere. Now, so fifthly is the next point, is having your ERP as a cloud service actually makes interactions with your suppliers and customers easier. It's a standard application in the cloud that's used by numerous companies. So some company at some point would have had the same interaction that you require potentially, and you can gain the benefits of that, the synergies associated with that. Also, it's much easier to create integrations between systems when they're both operating off stable platforms that aren't unique in their setup. And by that I mean it's not your servers with your version interacting with XYZ company's servers on their version. It's the version that's in the cloud, and it's standard for everyone, and it's all interactions that way. It makes it much easier to interact and create integrations that way. And finally, it's worth mentioning compliance. You're getting standard Microsoft policies and SLAs, and that makes compliance easier. For example, your GDPR regulations or potentially data security requirements that you have as part of your ISO audit. These are easier, as you don't have to create them from scratch. You got them there already, and you can just tailor them to suit. So I'd just like to take a moment now to talk about the Microsoft Azure environment for you guys. So, and I'm sure some of you are thinking around security of your data and records. So Azure is considered, the premier enterprise cloud offering. It provides a secure platform for businesses with unmatched security. Microsoft, I think they invest upwards of $1 billion a year, and they have nearly 3,500 security experts to protect your information effectively. So your data kind of is probably more secure in the data center than it would be in your own server room. Microsoft Office 365 products, for example, that's Excel, Outlook, SharePoint. All these applications we use every day have native links in Business Central, as it's a Microsoft product. That's key. So, and these extensive productivity tools, they allow your staff to work smarter, faster, and more effectively. And I've included, you see at the top there, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also part of the Microsoft group, and the native links with LinkedIn and Microsoft allow for deeper customer awareness and engagement. So you're getting all the benefits of the one Microsoft product line. So, and I just want to touch briefly with my next slide on what else do you get as part. What else do you get as part of the Microsoft products when you go to cloud with Business Central? So extensibility, and in this case, by that I mean it means where we can expand and add in new capabilities and functionalities or new applications onto your Business Central or to work with your Business Central environment. You can use custom apps, and this is where you can have an app to do a very particular specific function that you might, for example, we've one that manages meeting rooms, room bookings, or other ones that have, say, for example, in the construction sector for plant management on site. So the guys on the site can order JCBs, diggers, whatever they want to do, and manage that and link that in with your Business Central function. The common data model used effectively means that they're all coming from the same source, which makes writing and designing products easier. And this is all linked to your Office 365 natively. I'm conscious that I spent some time now talking away and waffling away around what Cloud ERP and what Microsoft Cloud is without actually having talked a lot about Business Central. So I wanted to choose, so why would you want to choose Business Central as your cloud-based ERP? Well, Business Central, it's not only in accounting and financial management capabilities, but it has sales and service, project management, supply chain, inventory, operations management features as well. What makes it unique and attractive really is that it harnesses the power of the one Microsoft environment, and it brings together business processes and personal and staff productivity as well. And by that I mean, well, business processes are automated and are made more efficient, which is grand, but also users who are already using Excel and Word day-to-day applications that they're familiar with, their productivity will improve and is made easier because they spend less time switching between different systems with different contexts or different views. And for example, you can export directly from Business Central to Excel or Word or PDF. So it just makes that seamless transition from one application to the other much easier. So the Business Central, it's a product. It's not new. It's a product with a proven track history. It's a different name potentially. So you've got older versions such as Nav 2.5 and Navision 09, and I know some of you are already on Navision 09 now and are looking to upgrade. And you can see through the iterations there on screen how these have kind of become more Windows-based with a much more familiar layout to the current Microsoft products. And that's extremely helpful. We find that really key is when you've got new users coming in or when you're rolling this out to existing users, the take up and the understanding, the comprehension and understanding of how the system, the flow within it works is much easier because everyone's familiar with Microsoft products. And finally, I suppose the next point is we're now moving to more mobile and web-based offerings, and that effectively is what Business Central Cloud is. It's a web-based. You access it through your browsers, but you can also do it through tablets and phones, etc. So I appreciate that was a lot to take on board, and I also chucked in some Business Central background there also. Next, now I want to go through very quickly some things that you need to consider before you start your project. So like I mentioned at the start, you could be upgrading your existing ERP from an older version of Nav. You could be moving from a different ERP altogether to Business Central, or maybe you're just in the middle of selecting your vendor or product, you're going through that beauty contest bit. These points apply to all different types. So a lot of the time I find putting the effort into the lessons learned exercise after a project has gone live pays wonders. When you document this and referring to ahead of the next similar project is always beneficial. The trust, if most of you have ERP already, trusting to people's memories of how that project went in the long term, it's not reliable. So one of the areas from my experience in ERP projects is understanding your business goals and your needs, but also understanding your existing processes. Now, again, I'm coming back to finance professionals here. I can't shake the accountant in me. As finance professionals, I'm sure that's already something you're probably aware of and familiar with. But what is needed really is an understanding and awareness of what you're trying to do. Are you going to tailor the system to your processes, or are you going to change your processes to suit the system? And within that, there needs to be a willingness to change from the whole company as well. To do this, you need to understand what ERP functionality that's on offer. And I appreciate that's difficult because how do you know the full functionality until you start? And how are we supposed to know before we start? So it's like the old chicken and egg issue, isn't it? And that's where getting a really good demonstration of the product beforehand is key, while also being open and willing to change and managing that change within your organization. Within your organization is critical. Change management, it doesn't have to be a big involved process, but you do have to be aware that it is change for people, and people sometimes can resist change. If you're moving from one ERP to another, is data integrity. You need to decide what data to bring with you, and if you need to cleanse it first. There's often a cost-benefit exercise needed to see if the cost of cleansing and bringing the data with you is worthwhile. And also, particularly in the cloud, that's very relevant, because storage capacity in the cloud may need to be increased to accommodate the years and years of data that you want to bring in. And would you be better off archiving that older data and referring to it if you ever do need to outside the ERP? So limit what you bring in and have it siloed somewhere else in an archive, in a database somewhere that you can drill down if you want it. By all means, I think most places tend to bring in a year comparative figures. From a financial reporting point of view, definitely a year's comparative figures to compare back to, and store the rest. And again, this also applies to those existing Navision customers who are upgrading. Your data will be included as part of the upgrade, but do you really need it all? Data migration is one of those areas that I think clients tend to underestimate the time involved and the effort involved it takes to get ready for that migration. I mentioned before change management. So what is the impact to your current processes, and are you willing to change those processes? How do people within those areas react to it? And a lot of this comes back to communication. In some cases, obviously it's not feasible to have everyone involved in the project. It becomes unwieldy, but yet you have to communicate to the people who aren't involved what you're doing and how it will change and improve their role or function with the company. Again, having realistic and achievable timelines is key. It's allocating the resources that are required from your end to meet those timelines. If your resources are full-time jobs and you also throw on project work on top of that, it can be challenging. Obviously, having dedicated resources is better and generally leads to a much more successful project rollout, but obviously there's a cost to that as well. One other area that I think, from my experience, that clients tend to underestimate when looking at these things, or assume will work almost, is testing and training. Unrealistic expectations for users and timelines to familiarize themselves with the systems before starting UAT, and then the sufficient time it means to dedicate to that after training and before UAT for system familiarization, that is often underestimated. And also the importance of it, going straight from training into UAT without a gap. Rushed user acceptance testing, it can lead to curtailed review of the system prior to rollout. You're not going to spot the issues. I prefer on our ERP projects to always have at least 2 shorter UAT cycles, and obviously that depends on the size. The bigger project, you get more, but your first round of UAT catches the low-hanging fruit bits potentially, and the next iteration is more detailed and more focused. And if we need 2 to 3, we can work that in. Project sponsorship within the organization is also a key requirement. I mean, that the sponsor needs to have sufficient authority within your organization to coordinate and manage your resources internally. We as Storm, obviously we have project managers and we manage the Storm resourcing and how it works, and we give you guidelines and everything on how the UAT should progress and what we need to be looking for and manage the test cases and so on. But you do need someone internally who's got a bit of clout to get people to move as well. And again, that is change management, and I've mentioned that before. The system works. Like it's a standard out of the box business centric system. It's getting the people around it to work with it, and that's the key change management piece you need to look at. And finally, I've got scalability, and that's the key bit the cloud offers. You're getting a system that can expand or contract to meet your future requirements easily and quickly, and is it cost effective? And that, again, that's going to be one of your main considerations when you do, like I said, when you do your beauty contest for these things. Okay, moving on to the next slide. That's pretty much it. How can we help? And again, really what we'd like to do is we're going to issue to everyone after this webinar a questionnaire, and I've got 30 minutes, but actually it's probably really 10. It's really just a starting point to frame your ideas, what you have to consider. And with that questionnaire, we can meet with a senior functional consultant from my team, either myself or another person, for an assessment of your existing ERP system. And we'll provide a proposal and a migration plan for that. And like I said, we'll issue that after the end of this webinar. I can hand you back to Rob. There you go, Rob.
Thanks, Brendan. I'll kick off the Q&A. I can see we have a few questions in from our viewers, and we will do our best to get through as many as possible. But as we do have a limited time, if there are any questions we don't get around to answering during today's session, one of our team will follow up directly to answer your query. So a question that we probably get quite often, Brendan, what is the typical cost for a project?
Yeah, how long is a piece of string is another one. Yeah, that's always a good question. It's the key one that everyone gets, and I suppose the answer is the usual, not the one that everyone wants to hear. It depends. I suppose it depends on the size of the database you're bringing in, the number of users you have, how complex your existing processes are or your system is. So in some cases, moving from the vision up is easier than moving in from a whole new one, if it's a very complex solution. But I think the key way to answer that will be for the questionnaire. If people, even like I said, 10 minutes will answer some key questions for us that we can provide that answer for you then, like I said, after consultation with a senior consultant at our end.
Perfect, thanks, Brendan. And in a similar vein, and might be a similar answer, but one of the questions that's coming is, how long does a project typically take?
Oh yeah, grand. That's a good one. And again, I'm sorry, I'm going to hit the play on the recording. It depends. But I would imagine like it like I said, it's important if you think back to the things I was saying earlier. It's important to have realistic timelines. And yes, you might really be able to do it in 3 months, maybe. But would you really want that risk? I from what I've seen in the past with upgrades, you know, from relatively kind of medium to large size companies, you want to be planning in 6 to 9 months at least. But again, if you have a look at the questionnaire, fill it in, send it back to the guys, we'll have a look at it. So it depends. If you can imagine, if you're just upgrading your existing system to have the same functionality at the end of it, just to be cloud-based, that might move quicker than someone who's going with a completely new system redesign or process redesign. So it again, and I'm sorry, Rob, it all depends. Or I'm sorry to whoever asked that question. It all depends, unfortunately.
Okay. And I know you touched upon this during the presentation, and this might be a question on the back of that we've got in here, but one of the questions is, if we have Office 365, but we don't have Microsoft ERP solution at the moment, but move to ERP, can the Office 365 be integrated in?
Yeah, completely. It's actually really good. You, as the Office 365 tenant owner, effectively control the licenses. We as Storm, as your partner, or your partner will have to be given access to that, and we can manage your licenses for you, but they're within your control at all time, and it's linked to your existing Office 365. Like for example, Storm users, I can log in online to my Office 365, and I can see then the left-hand side all the applications: Excel, Word, SharePoint, whatever I'm using, Business Central, Visio if you're using it for project management, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's completely seamlessly, and it's just an extra icon almost for you to tick. As long as you've got a valid license, it'll work seamlessly.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Brendan.
No problem, welcome.
Okay, looking at time, I'm afraid we're just up on time actually. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this session informative and beneficial. As Brendan mentioned, all attendees will receive an ERP assessment questionnaire after this webinar. If you are interested in learning more or want to find out how your business can benefit from D365 BC, please reach out directly using the contact details on screen. Thank you all again for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.